So we'll go somewhat all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
All right. Maybe we'll figure out how much further back you choose to go. So I'm originally from upstate New York.
Yep.
Came down here to Atlanta to go to college.
Okay.
And while I was in college, I had this notion that I wanted to be an extra in movies.
Oh.
And so I thought that would be fun to do.
Yeah.
I had, I was in school plays and stuff when I was in high school, but not very much of a class clown, not anything like at all of what my personality was. I was student government and that kind of stuff, not class clown.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how you go about being. There was a handful of movies that were being shot in Atlanta at that time, so it was like a growing entertainment scene even then.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll give it a try, but I didn't know how to do it. And so Creative Loafing, which is the free newspaper here in Atlanta, used to have a ton of ads in the back for photographers and all that other stuff. So I found a person who would take headshots and showed up at the studio with a bunch of different outfits and a whole thing to make a comp card so I could, figure out how to be an extra. And I think this person was really just a scam because I was money poorer and picture less. There were no pictures. So I put that idea aside for some time period.
Yeah.
And then about a year or so later, thought there's got to be some other way to get into this whole lucrative business of being an extra. And I thought, I'll try stand-up comedy.
Okay.
So I'll date myself a little bit by saying that I looked in the phone book in my dorm room, and there were several listed in Atlanta under comedy clubs. And so I called them. I didn't know the vocabulary. I didn't know what an open mic night was or an amateur night or how one went about it. It was a comedy cold call.
Okay.
It didn't take long to figure out the vocabulary of amateur night and how they sign up and all of those things. And so there was a place that was doing open mic that night. And so they said, if you're down here by 7:30 and sign up, you'll get on the list and you'll get a chance to go up. So from, phone call to name on a list was 3 or 4 hours.
Oh my gosh.
5 hours difference. No idea what I was doing. Truly no idea what I was doing. But I did it. And so skipping over. I started to get gigs, and so in that first calendar year, I used to have a yellow pad that I would make notes. So it was like show 1, show 2, show 3, show 4. I still have. And in that first year, I did almost 300 sets of comedy. So I did a lot of comedy. Got to be a house MC here for a place, and that was a club that was open at that time in Atlanta. And then graduation was approaching from undergrad, and so I decided that I needed to, and this was really what I would characterize as like a shoulder time period between all landline to cell phone, right? Yeah. And back at that time, most comedy clubs would have what they would be called the comedy condo. And so you wouldn't be, if you were the host or the feature act, you weren't, and sometimes the headliner, depending on the club, weren't actually staying at a hotel. Okay. You were staying at a 2 or 3 bedroom condo that the club owned nearby.
No way.
And that's where you stayed. And you would, and that was kind of the way it was back at that time. So I was listening to what I considered much older people. Keep in mind, I'm 20 years old.
Okay.
And they're 30s, 40s, some late 20s, obviously, but certainly people in their 30s and 40s that were trying to manage their lives over the telephone. So they're trying to discipline their kids over the phone. They're trying to sort out their lives with their spouses over the telephone. It was a whole thing. And I thought, I got to figure this out. So I'm going to go to LA. And go to LA to be, and so I applied to law schools in Southern California for the most part. Yeah. And my dad, to give the other piece of the puzzle, my father, who I still practice law with, always practiced personal injury law. Okay. So part of what I had appreciated about who he was as a person and kind of as a role model, thought this would give me the opportunity to kind of prioritize the things that I wanted to prioritize in life. He was available for us as a family and things of that nature.
Got it.
So I'd always thought I'll become a lawyer and go practice with my dad.
Yeah.
And then I got involved in comedy, and he was very consistent and very upfront, saying you should be a comedian and not come be a personal injury lawyer.
Oh, really?
Oh, for 100%. He was absolutely like,
wow,
go be a comedian. And so I went to Pepperdine for law school, and was law student by day, comedian by night, and then by the end of 3 years of being out in LA, felt comfortable that while I love stand-up and I was reasonably decent at stand-up, there's a part of being a stand-up comedian that is very, very similar to any person who travels for work. Anybody who does sales on the road knows exactly what it's like to be a comedian, right? You got to go see your customers where they are, right? And so I had other things that I had wanted in life, and I thought I'll go back to Atlanta and start practicing, and I can always still do corporate gigs, and I could keep comedy a part of my life. Yeah. And then some years passed, and had an opportunity to buy the club. So we wound up buying the club, and it's sort of how we find ourselves here. So I've got a younger brother.
Okay.
And I would characterize so if I was to look back and say, okay, how much was humor a part of? Yeah. I would say that there was a lot of laughter. My dad, I don't think that I would necessarily say he would have ever been a class clown. Certainly that wasn't my mom's, the personality necessarily. She was very funny, but not like that. So it was more, it's an interesting. I was actually mowing I wasn't mowing the lawn yesterday. I was out doing yard work, and our neighbors to us, they often get together, and so they're a family that's out in the backyard a lot.
Oh, okay.
And I was thinking one of my favorite parts of having them as neighbors is they are always laughing. They're together a lot as a family, and whether it's friends or just the family themselves, there is always laughter coming from next door, and what a pleasant sound that is. Yep. You can hear a leaf blower and a lawnmower and a chainsaw or whatever, but it's nice to hear the laughter too.
Got it.
So we were always, we talked a lot as a family. We had a lot of conversation, certainly, but there's a couple of old cassette tapes that I had from as a little kid of talking into a little tape recorder of making jokes, and there's some old family videos of me acting out some silly things that I might have seen on television, but I would have put that more in I liked being in the school play part of things than being a comedian per se.
Yes.
There's so much emphasis for kids to become specialized in activities, right? And I think there's a lot of things that have shifted to it, and it relates in some respects to how comedians come up with joke ideas, right? Okay. So, the whole idea of you had to be there talks about proximity, but it also talks about experience. Okay. And so you had to be there means you have to, in some respects, relate to the experience or the subject matter of the material, which, again, is a reference to commonality. So when there were 3 television stations, I could more confidently predict that you had probably seen the same shows that I had. Yep. But with 1,000 streaming platforms, you may really be into the shows that you're into, and I may really be into the shows that I like, and you may not know what I'm watching, and I've never heard of what you're watching. So those, and I think as people sort of lament as they approach middle age, they look back at a time in their lives and they, view childhood differently, and the whole idea of what does unstructured free play look like. Yes. And I learned how to play basketball playing basketball in the driveway at a buddy's house. And we made up the rules to how we played baseball in the neighbor's yard and those kinds of things. It's harder and harder, even as you drive around. Think about how infrequent it is to come upon kids just outside playing. Right. I'm not saying you might not see them on a electric scooter. You might not see them, one or two kids shooting a basketball. But that idea of like, we played every night until the streetlights came on, like as the old cliche goes. And that's in part because we track them into activities quicker. Right. And there's certainly a place for that. But I think there's an odd thing that happens, certainly also for us as adults, about when we become self-conscious. And so for me, a lot of parenting had to do with, I want to push off that being self-conscious for my girls as long as possible. So it's why I wanted them to be in theater when they were young, the little acting camps, because, you take a 6-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl and you let them play a game, and there's a likelihood that they'll probably both sing a song, right? But you slide that boy up to 10 and that girl up to 10, and one of his buddies says, "What are you singing for?" And that's the last time that they will ever sing, right? And that's a shame. Right? So so to go back to where we started that little offshoot, when my brother and I were younger, we probably goofed around in the way siblings do. We're only a few years apart. As my activities, as I transitioned into middle school, into high school, and he then, kind of went into his own path, he became a little more specialized in athletics.
Got it.
While I was still playing on high school teams, I wasn't at the same level of involvement in sports as he was. And so, and again, it wasn't like I was the class clown, or I wasn't, any of those kinds of things. So this was just, one of those odd things. So it's so it's an interesting thing, and again, as you kind of go through your own process with your children, right? One of the things that I think is interesting is regrets, like, increase in weight with time. Right. So something that is a light regret at 20 can become something that you can't even lift by the time you're 50.
Interesting.
Right. So I think from his perspective, and I'm very grateful for having had the experience of getting to be out in LA and see what that was like, and do the auditions and experience the grind of all of that, and have no regrets about that. So when I was able to say, I now want to choose to come back to Atlanta and pursue this other path, I was able to do that without feeling like, oh, I should have. I also think, to the extent that, and sometimes lawyers generally aren't necessarily thought of this way, but most, I could argue almost without exception, most lawyers, even if they're solo firms, one lawyer in the office, they're going to have something of a support staff, and they're entrepreneurial businesses in the community. So my father's career, if I were to look at it, I would say it was extremely entrepreneurial. And while there is a community benefit to it, because you're helping people in some very challenging circumstances in their lives, he knows how hard it was to run a business, and the sacrifices that you have to make. So I think, and almost in some respects, there was an element of him saying, I know the challenges that I've faced, and you may choose a different path for yourself, which will come with its own challenges. But I don't want you to feel like you're taking on the same challenges I did, because I feel like you're supposed to. I loved Atlanta. So I'm from outside of Albany. When I was looking at colleges, I looked at some colleges in Massachusetts and, Pennsylvania and things of that nature. And when I came down here to look at Emory, I was like, this is, you can't, the climate's amazing. It's growing, I'm
inexpensive comparably.
Yeah, right. And through comedy, so one of the interesting things about doing stand-up, particularly when you go back to cities, by the time I had gotten out of law school, I had lived perhaps for like 6 weeks in Nashville. Right, because you're there for almost a week at a time, and you're not really living as a tourist.
Yep.
Right, you're not obviously a resident, but you're living there more like you're there.
Yes.
And so I had the opportunity to see a lot of different places, and thought that Atlanta was really a terrific mix of growth opportunity, reasonable weather variation. Like I do like cold and warm. And so I still feel that way today. I really think I know Atlanta sort of has its detractors at times, but I would say more often than not, you come down 400 here and it's sort of twilight, it's a little dusk. You kind of round that bend and Buckhead is all lit up in those buildings, right? And to me, that's just like a great little shot of energy. You're like, man, you can do anything here, which is terrific. So the analogy that I would make is each performer, any person who, and again, I would go back to sales, right? You can be around, there are sales techniques. But each salesperson is going to utilize those techniques in a different way. So the technique might be the same, but it's the execution that varies. Right? And so likewise with comedy, the way, and keep in mind, the only job of the comedian is to get a stranger to laugh. Right? That's it. That's the only job.
Right.
How you get from open my mouth to you laugh is choose your own adventure for every comedian, right? And so anybody who's gone to a comedy show will see with each different performer, even if they're talking about the same thing, they're talking about their relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, they're talking about a relationship with a child, they're talking about something that they observed on television or heard on the radio or read or whatever it is. And each person may talk about that. You may have 3 comedians who talk about their relationship with their spouse. But there's going to be 3 different ways of talking about it. There may be 3 different premises and punchlines, that pepper each performer's set. It's just a question of figuring out, so when you walk into a place for the first time and you're building a relationship with a person that you're going to have a professional relationship with, they are naturally going to make some assumption of, do you match what their expectations are? Right? And so if you look clean cut and buttoned down, then there's some expectation that you are then clean cut and buttoned down. Right? If you come in looking like you're the bad boy of IT and you fit with that, then there's still credibility. So it's not as though they won't trust you as a provider, but you just have to match in some respects what their expectations are. And so a lot of times as a comedian, it's a process of figuring out, who am I on stage? Is what I'm saying matching what they perceive me to be? And because otherwise you could battle that your entire set and you think, why did that not go so well? Right? And you may, that's a little bit of a process. So when you're first starting out, it's open mic night. Most people don't know what they're doing. Everybody's amateurs. It's a lot of squeaky trombones, right? Until you finally learn how to. So it's a process of, how do I make a note? How do I make all the notes? How do I play somebody else's music? Right? And then how do I write my own song? And everybody's working towards writing their own song. So the play somebody else's song doesn't happen so much in comedy because everybody's telling their own jokes, right? But some people stylistically, if they loved Andrew Dice Clay, they might write jokes that are more in keeping with that style of humor than a person who today wants to be like Nate Bargatze. Fairly quickly, thankfully. Like my writing style has largely stayed the same. And but I do think that I was aware of. So when I was in college, the place where I was the house MC, actually, he's one of my partners now in the Punchline, owned a different club.
Oh, really?
And he would be in the office working during the day, and I would take a video camera, and I would turn on the lights and the microphone, and I would set up the camera, and I would perform. I would work out my jokes I'd have a pad on the, and part of it was because I wanted to see what did it look like? What was I really doing? And again, any person who's done sales or presentations or whatever, you have, breaking down film.
Yeah.
And you go, dude, you've paced the entire time. What are you walking around for? Right? And so as a comedian, you don't realize how much, right? So there's the words that you're saying, there's the gestures you're making with your body, and then there's the silence, right? And sometimes the quiet is the underutilized part. Newer comedians, it's like word, and they don't create any space. That is really often where humor lives. It lives in the spaces. So for me, it was helpful to understand which gestures was I using as like punctuation, and where were some other places, and so. So I could make a good argument that
a lawyer would.
That again, if we wanted to have a conversation of is personal injury a kind of sales, then I would argue it is, right? So I'm trying to agree on the value of a subjective thing. You've sustained an injury. That injury has had some consequences, and what are we going to agree on what the value of those are? And that my broken leg may be different than the value of your broken leg. Okay. So it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution. What I have found is where, again, people are relaxed, where you're removing conflict, then you're creating an environment where there can be consensus, right? And so if we can agree, we may not, we'll both maybe give a little on what we think ultimately this injury is going to be worth, and likewise, we're both going to agree that this is funny, right? And even arguably, we may be laughing at it always. Maybe I could make the argument that we're laughing at it for different reasons, because when I'm thinking about, they're talking about my life, and you're sitting next to me laughing, thinking they're talking about my life, right? Those are experiences that are very unique to each one of us. That the comedian has created a piece of material that's open enough to allow both of us to participate. I am interested in, and I've always been fascinated by, how people grow their business, how people stay interested in an industry. And I do think that, I haven't had the kind of professional career where I've been doing something that I wanted to stop doing. So it's hard for me to identify with somebody who says 5 more years and then I get to retire. Which is just and I'm not knocking that. I just know that that's an experience that people have, and certainly I'm very appreciative of the fact that thus far I've been able to make it this far in life without having to really wrestle with some of those other things that many people do. Many people do. And so interestingly, with like social media and all the rest of it, it can seem like everybody's just pursuing their passion. Right? When in point of fact, my guess would be is that there are millions of Americans who go to work in the morning because they have to have that health care. Right? And so it's a little bit of a luxury to say, like, I just kind of bailed because I like telling jokes and it was great. And somebody's like, yeah, well, I would have too if I could have done it that way.
Right.
So I do think that sometimes it is, what is the place that those things that you're passionate about have, right? So we've sort of have embraced this idea of the side hustle culture, right? Yeah. And so it's great that you invited me to be on the podcast.
Yeah, sure.
But it's entirely possible that you'd enjoy this podcast way more if you just talked to guys who collected watches, right? And you could kind of geek out on the watches or do whatever, right? And maybe that's the second podcast. You do this stuff, and then you do the watch podcast.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important. I think it's important that we show that to our kids, right? That it's important to have things that motivate you. And I do think that there's a lot of, I don't want to say it's malaise, but there's definitely, I think the closer you get to talk to somebody who's maybe 20, the more they struggle with this idea of how do I get from point A to point B, right? And so perhaps your grandparents, maybe my grandparents, certainly a great-great-parent said, you know, you're going to go at the factory for your entire adulthood like we did. And by the way, I'm going to get to every Little League game that we can go to, and there won't be such a thing as travel sports. And we're going to get up to the lake when we get a chance, or we're going to try to go ski once a year like we did, or go to the campground, or do whatever those things are. And my hope is at the end of that process, you figure out a way to get a little further than I did, right? Yeah. And I candidly have talked to a lot of people who are 50s, 60s, 40s that have real questions about their children's ability from a professional standpoint to do better than they have. Now, that may be where the people that I'm having the conversations with, right? But it is an interesting dynamic that says between as much as college costs and trying to get a house, and, you know, the average car payment, I think, is supposedly over $1,000 a month now, and you know, all these things that at some point it's hard to make the math, right? In a way that says you're gonna, you know, figure this out. So for somebody who's 20 to say, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think my advice would be, well, take a shot at the passion thing, because maybe it turns out the passion thing, you know, that's probably the age-old parenting question, right?
Yep.
Would I rather you be struggling to keep your head above water, but pursuing something you love, or would I rather have you barely keeping your head above water, doing something you hate?
Yeah.
If keeping your head above water is what's in common between those two things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think those are still sort of interesting issues that are out there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a lot. You know, you could go to almost any community in the country, go to the chamber meeting, and there's going to be a conversation about workforce development and affordable housing, and everybody's struggling with the same issues, which is how do we make all this stuff work?
Yeah.
The person who stands on stage, you know, historically, their primary job is to say, let's agree that for the next 90 minutes, whatever is on that list of how are we going to make this work, we'll leave it in the car, and let's just be in here amongst ourselves and laugh and take a respite from all that.
Yeah.
And I can't fix whatever's waiting for you out in that car, right? But for the time being, let's take a time out from all of that. I really enjoy a one-on-one conversation. So the only thing that I don't like about this conversation right now is that I'm talking more than you are, right? And I'm fascinated by your story and how did you, right? And there's a little bit of an interplay about that. Yeah. And part of that's because I do like finding places of connection.
Yes.
And I'm interested in what do you think about this subject, or what did you experience with that? And some of that is it allows me to understand, to help connect people in my life, right? Yeah. So I do enjoy that. I'm not necessarily, I think I've probably aged into, I would rather know, like, what kept you up last week? And have a conversation about that, than to say, Braves look good so far this year, right? That kind of conversation I could kind of skip, but tell me what you're really actually flipped out about your kid who's a sixth grader. Now that you have a high schooler, or next week you're dropping your kid off at college for the first time. Where does that put you in your head, right? I want to explore that kind of stuff. The interesting thing about being on stage, and I tell this to comedians, certainly new comedians all the time, is pick the most successful comedian you can think of, and put them in their largest venue of the year. Okay. So it's sold out. It's State Farm Arena. Yeah. They got 15,000 people down there. They tell a joke. Somebody in that audience doesn't like it.
Guaranteed.
And they don't laugh. So the reality is, every comedian, every one of us, every set fails 100% of the time for somebody in the audience. I find that so freeing.
Yeah.
Because if I had to think now, clearly, I got to get you at some point. I mean, I can't go over for the set with you. That's a tragedy.
Yeah.
But any given person, every single joke, somebody doesn't laugh.
Yeah.
And I love it. Because once you realize all it is failure, then I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Right? I've relieved the pressure of, this has got to work. None of them are going to work for somebody.
It's liberating.
It's super liberating.
Yeah.
Right?
That's interesting.
So, and the other part of it that I think is interesting, and again, I would relate it to sales, right? So there is always going to be a space between who you are to your customers and who you are to your family, right? Yeah. And in some respects, there is certainly as it relates to stand-up, there is a version of the performer that will always be a stranger to the audience.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So for me, if I tell a joke about this, that, or the other, I certainly don't take it personally because you don't really know me. Yeah. Right. So whatever you're in some, now maybe I'm turning this into a mental health podcast, right? But from the standpoint of what's really being rejected? Yeah. Is Jamie really being rejected, or is this version of Jamie that's on stage standing behind this microphone somehow being rejected? And as long as I recognize that those are really two different people, then I'm okay. Yeah. Certainly implicit in that is I'm pretty adamant about staying the version of myself that I am rather than the version of myself that might be on stage.
Yep.
Yeah. Being a middle-aged man is a challenging thing to be for a variety of reasons. Yep. And I think oftentimes people really don't get the kinds of resources that they need to talk through some things, right? Some people, like, depending on what their faith is, they'll have small group or things of that nature. But oftentimes within even those kind of constructs, there are little
plasticity
barriers, right? That you say, hey, listen, I'm going to see you all weekend at the lacrosse tournament, so I don't know that I'm going to really tell you about this dream that I had last night that I really can't quite wrap my head around, right? But there needs to be a place for people to really kind of talk that stuff through. Yeah. And I've got a buddy of mine who sometimes puts together like a little guys group, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of pulls from the various places in his life and gets everybody together and says, we're just gonna, and it's designed to like support a local restaurant in the community, and right, so it's like let's everybody get together and we'll go and we'll talk about something. Yeah. So I saw him at the gym. We're having a conversation. I said, "Say, not for nothing. Maybe invite somebody in your contact list who's a financial advisor." And not in a way that's going to sell everybody in the group on move your money to this guy.
Right.
But talk them through what's going on in the world and how you might think about these things, so that I may have a question that I'm curious about, but to go back to that idea of self-conscious, I might be self-conscious to ask.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I know I'm in my 50s now, but I really still don't understand the difference between whole and term life insurance, right? And everybody else in the group's like, what?
Yep.
You know, I'm like, you guys don't know either. Nobody knows, right? Why are you looking at me like that for, right? So, you know, but if you spend enough time, particularly, again, you think about all the hurdles you have to jump through, even just to have regular business communications. I'm screening you because I'm not picking up my phone. I'm screening you because I'm not replying to your email. I'm replying, you know, and so there's this emphasis on time and busy and you know, and I would argue a lot of it is clutter. But eventually, if I've got you, I might be a little stickier with you if I say, hey, so whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was the last book you read?
Yeah.
Right? You got to, whatever. And it allows people to be excited about something. I'd rather be excited about something and be excited about what you're excited about.
100%.
Yeah. It is, so geez. Okay. So let's figure out how we're going to answer the question. All right. So I will oftentimes, I've had the opportunity to, I do a lot of stuff with like youth leadership and that kind of training, right? And one of the things that we talk about, particularly when we talk about like community service, right, is when you think about a track and field and a relay race, that maybe the founder of the business is the one who's at the starting line. And they carry that baton, and they take off, and their job is to get to that next runner. And really, that runner isn't standing, waiting for the baton. They have to start running before the baton's there, and they have to, at some point, reach their hand back without looking, and assume that the person who's handing off the baton is going to reach forward and place it in their hand. And then once they have it, their job is to run and be prepared to give it to somebody else. So for me, I view owning the club as being, this is my time to carry the baton.
Got it.
I received it from the original owners, right? And now I'm running, obviously together with the partners, but need to be ready at an appropriate time to be prepared
for the next leg of the race.
With the hope that there's somebody ahead of me on the track that's ready to take it. I don't want to find out all of a sudden, oh, I am the anchor. This is a bad plan. So the business has changed. I think the business will continue to change. The way people consume comedy has been influenced by technology. People on their phones all the time. So there's always new comedians. There's which is kind of neat that there's maybe somebody who got on stage in the last 30 days for their very first open mic that I'm going to be looking to book as a headliner 5 or 10 years from now, right? I don't know their name. I don't know where they are, but I have to trust that they're going to be out there. You know, we're in our 44th year at this point. So we've been doing okay. And I don't see any reason for the foreseeable future why that should change. You know, Atlanta's still a great city to be in. City continues to grow, and that's all great. So I have an interesting mix of people who have said, oh my God, we used to go there all the time. And oh my God, I had no idea you existed, right? So it's like I have the full spectrum of people who are still, I can either reactivate a former customer or acquire a new customer. And both of those to me are interesting puzzles to solve. The other analogy that I would use, and I'm certain it's one that other folks would think about, is these seats, although permanent, are also perishable. Meaning, once the show starts, and the comedian takes the stage, any seat that's empty, I can't sell. I don't get to roll them over to the next week.
Right.
I don't have 2-week-old Jamie Bendall tickets.
Right.
They're rotten.
Yep.
Put them in the dumpster.
Yep.
So part of what I've become accustomed to over the years that we've been doing this is, in my mind, we're recording this on a Monday. This week's shows are like a wave that's beginning to crest and will crash at my feet.
Yes.
And come Sunday night when the show's over, it's like the tide rolls back out.
Yep.
And I can see next week's show and next week's show and next week's show all out there on the horizon.
Yeah.
And again, I just have to have some faith that those waves are going to keep coming in.
Yep.
And anybody who's in that kind of reset, replenish kind of business has a similar experience.
Yeah.
I gotta be, I know I'm in the end of the first quarter, but I gotta be thinking, am I tracking okay? And for a club like ours, we're usually 3 to 6 months out in our bookings.
Yep.
So
Wow.
yeah. So, but it's interesting. It's always fun. So sure. So one of the things that I think has been really an unexpected part of the girls when they were younger would get, and I'm not that they're here, but my phone's over here because I'm gesturing to my phone. The people who are in my contact list,
Yes.
it's kind of neat.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I believe it.
So there have been times when the kids were younger and we'd be watching a movie and there would be somebody that was in the movie and I'd be like, oh, I know them. And they're like, no, you don't. And I could text them and
Pull the phone,
so that was always kind of neat.
Yep.
More because they thought it was neat.
Correct. Yes.
And there have been times where I've certainly when we first bought the club, there were occasions where I would be in the car with somebody taking them to morning radio, and I would think, this is this is somebody who I used to watch on television or whatever, and here I am in such a different context with them, and just thinking like, this is and again, part of what's interesting about comedy in the same way that it would be for music, right? So do you go to trade shows
every once in a while?
Every once in a while.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's probably a little bit of a trade show circuit.
Yeah.
And there's some shows that are better than other shows.
100%.
Right?
Yep.
And within those shows, there's probably vendors that are better than vendors.
Yes.
And so there's probably some people that you've known for years that are in your business, and you probably cross paths with them at whatever it is, the Expo 26, and you're like, oh my God, did you see their booth at what they're doing this year?
Yes.
Right? And so every industry, every business has that. What I have really loved over the years with comedy is that if I was going to be in Denver this week, I could see who's playing at the club in Denver, and there's a pretty good likelihood that I know the person.
Got it.
And so you almost have like a buddy, or at least a peer, that you could go see almost any place. And then when you're together, you can say, oh, have you been and seen what they did? And that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And that to me is really sort of what is the fun and the camaraderie,
the fraternity of it,
a little bit of the fraternity of it.
Yeah.
And again, it's important, no matter what a person's field is to embrace a little bit of whatever is the fraternity, right? And that we should all be so lucky to have some longevity in something.
Yes.
Where you can be appreciative of other people's success, recognize that if you're able to extend a courtesy to somebody and help who's in a rougher spot, that you may find yourself at some point in a rougher spot, and someone else can, or that same person can be in a place to help mitigate that for you a little bit. So I always like to think of most of these things as you can think of yourself as a sprinter, but if you're lucky, you're running a marathon, and so stay on pace. Some miles are going to be better than others, but all things being equal, you hopefully get to the finish line and don't collapse when you get there.